Hey, welcome back. It's Thursday again, and Cynthia and I are here to talk about archetypes. Today, we want to talk about four primary principles that apply whether you're working with organizational archetypes or individual archetypes. I'm going to share two, and then I'm going to toss this in, and she's going to share the other two. So basically, when you measure archetypes, you need to keep in mind that what they are basically is stories. They're human stories. And that's the reason they're so sticky. It's why we gravitate toward them. It's why people really enjoy working with the system and with the patterns because we understand them already. They're human stories that are written on our DNA and they're just part of who we are. And so there are things that are easy to identify both when I see them in myself and when I see them in other people or when I see them in groups. So, premise number one, archetypes are stories. Premise number two, we all have the capacity for all 12 of the patterns. So, even though I might score highest on several of them and I find them easier, more comfortable, they're kind of like my go tos, I do have the capacity to grow and develop patterns that aren't as strong for me, things that I might struggle with or don't come as naturally to me. So we can use this knowledge as a coaching tool, whether it's working with individuals or with groups to bring up attributes, behaviors, things that may not be as comfortable. I can get there with a little bit of coaching and knowledge about how to do that. So moving on to the third one, Cynthia.
Yeah. So Teresa's talking about, the capacity for us to move between patterns as we become aware. But the third principle to keep in mind is that actually, even within a pattern, we can move. And that's because the archetypes, if we look at the pattern, they exist on a continuum. And, there are more highly evolved ways for to show up in each of these storylines, and there are also what we might think of as more unconscious ways that we call shadows. So we think of the continuum as each archetype storyline has strengths and it has shadows. And when it shows up in an individual or in an organization, we can be asking all the time, where are we on that continuum? Are we showing up above the line or are we showing up more in a disempowered shadow state? So we can transform situations by continuing to move in a positive space around a pattern. And then the final fourth way to think about archetypes as a development model is to know that, across the 12 that we use, we might have one or two that we would consider latent. And that does not mean that we don't have the capacity for those storylines. It just means that right now, at this moment in time, we're not resonating as much with those patterns. So we call it latent because actually can develop a latent pattern once you become aware. So for me, for example, I don't score very high on the pattern revolutionary. Doesn't mean I can't ever tap into revolutionary, but if I want to tap into that latent pattern, I have to do some work around it. And I would also say that, sometimes the patterns that are latent for us are the ones that we reject, or the ones that when we see them in somebody else, they kind of rub us the wrong way. So latent patterns can also help us uncover our own kind of unconscious biases about experiencing other individuals in the world. So, four ways that we have coaches and consultants taking the concept, the very simple framework of archetypes, and using it to drive change.
Very cool. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye bye.
Bye.